YouTube Ozzico, the Goat House is back. We are past the NFL trade deadline. Bunch of trades happened. Let's take a look at 10 players that could be traded in this upcoming NFL offseason. Take a look at last year's offseason. Take a look at the deadline. Players are getting traded like crazy in today's era. So trades will happen this offseason. Some big time players will be traded. So I'm excited to break it down. Some guys we're also discussing the deadline, but a lot of new players that we haven't heard about that I think we will once we get to the offseason. So excited to break this all down for you guys. You can play along in the comments or on Twitter with us on which players you think could be dealt. Follow us on Twitter. A lot going on there. Super followers get bonus content. And I'll actually, for the super followers, I'll actually give top landing spots for the players in this video that we're about to discuss. So links and pin in the comments for that Twitter, for our Picks League, for our sponsors, GLD Shop, Liquid IV, code GOAT for discounts. I'm rocking the Chiefs GLD Shop chain. They have NFL teams, NFL jersey pendants, real stuff, very cool stuff. Check it out. Links pinned in the comments. And yeah, here's our Twitter. A lot going on here. Interesting debate. Who's the best quarterback from that 2021 class? You guys are voting. Justin Fields leading the way right now. It's pretty early on in that poll, you see. So head over there, vote. We got you guys covered with everything NFL constantly. I'm on Twitter 24/7, so make sure you check that out. Link pinned in the comments. First one's pretty obvious. 1 out of 10 here on this video. Brandin Cooks, who was discussed during the deadline. We'll talk about a couple players that were discussed during the deadline, but a lot of new players here. Remember, a lot of guys that were discussed in trade rumors, talks at the deadline, they're about to be free agents, so they can't be traded unless they're tagged and traded in the upcoming offseason. We're kind of looking for a lot of players that maybe have a 1 year left going into next year, or maybe 2, things like that. So Cooks was discussed, but a lot of teams called. The Cowboys were kind of the most notable one because it kind of went up until the clock ended at the deadline there, and they couldn't reach a deal. He'll have another year left on his deal. Actually, have 2 more years left on his deal. There were some obstacles for him why he didn't get traded. One was he has $18 million guaranteed next year, which still could be a thing, but another big one was the Texans wanted a second and a fourth. No team wanted to do that, with that money, being guaranteed there as well. But let's fast forward to the offseason. Had more time to think about it a little bit. Feels like Cooks, even though it sounds like he's returning. We saw that news today. He didn't play last night, though. So he may want out again in the offseason. Texans had more time to think about it. Maybe they dropped their asking price down. Maybe teams will be willing. Maybe they'll be comfortable with that guaranteed money, that base salary next year, because right now it's a little bit of a mystery. You don't want to tie yourself up to money when it's kind of up in the air on what money you can and can't spend, what money you will and will not have, in the future. You have a better idea. You have a better outlook once we get to the offseason. Like, all right, we can spend that. We know what we can spend. We know who we're going to re-sign, things like that. So that's why it would make sense to kind of reopen these talks, whether it's the Cowboys or other teams. We heard the Rams, Packers, Vikings, Giants, these teams interested because teams have a better idea, and the Texans might drop their asking price. Who knows? They might get their asking price because the receiver draft and free agency class, pretty underwhelming. Not terrible. Free agency class isn't that good, but teams will be desperate for receivers, and they'll see that and be like, all right, we'll be willing to spend this money. We'll be willing to trade the second-round pick, perhaps. I don't think so, but maybe. And the Texans maybe like sitting there with a top pick in the draft, like, hey, we did so good in last year's draft, being this year, Stingley, Kenyon Green, Jalen Petrie, Dameon Pierce might win Rookie of the Year, So we want more picks. Let's trade Cooks for a third or a fourth and a fifth, something like that, and let's rebuild this thing. We're already kind of in that process. So all those reasons, several reasons why the trade makes more sense in the offseason and why it didn't happen in the deadline, but still can happen in the offseason. So Cooks is an easy one to make this list here. Let's talk about the Texans still. Laremy Tunsil, who wasn't really brought up during this trade deadline. He was brought up in the offseason quite a bit, maybe last trade deadline, but mainly in the offseason. But the Texans like him. Very good tackle. They very well could keep him. But again, fast forward to the offseason, 1 more year left in his deal coming up, and it could happen. Other teams desperate for a proven tackle, contenders. The Texans could just want more picks because, again, they killed it last draft, I should say, and maybe they got a high pick and they can collect even more picks. With Brandin Cooks, Laremy Tunsil, and they can be confident they can kill it in the draft again and really rebuild that thing. They have young offensive linemen like Kenyon Green, Titus Howard, so get another young one in there to build with them. Again, they very well could keep Tunsil, but it could be appealing to them. Could a team offer a late first-round round pick possibility. Maybe more likely to be a second, third, or 2 seconds, or second, third, and maybe like a fifth, something like that. Maybe it could just be appealing to the Texans. Teams will call. Teams will definitely offer for Tunsil because he's a very good tackle. Maybe not a first because he does have that injury concern, but it's a possibility there. But Texans could get a haul of picks by moving on from some of these guys and kind of continuing on that rebuild. And they have the picks to prove they can do it. From last year, the picks they brought, the players they brought in. So definitely a possibility here with a couple big time Texans players. Teams will call about them. Let's stay in the division here. Go with the Colts and STEPHON Gilmore, who getting up there in age, but still very solid out of a corner. Obviously, just a few years ago, he won Defensive Player of the Year. And the Colts, or believe it or not, he has another year on his deal after this year. You think up there in age, usually these guys sign 1-year deals. But he signed a 2-year, so he has 1 more year going into 2023, and it's a pretty team-friendly deal. It's not super cheap, but it's not super expensive, and I think teams will like that. And the Colts could possibly enter some sort of rebuild stage or retool stage this offseason because, they still got to deal with the quarterback situation. I get the feeling that I think everyone does that they're kind of fed up with trading for a veteran that you don't know what you're going to get from. Maybe they finally draft a guy. Maybe they need some more picks to do that. Ellinger's probably not the answer. Unless you're still, if you're stage 1 of that rebuild, you're starting to collect some other players and you're kind of waiting to pounce on the right quarterback there. So maybe you stick with Ellinger perhaps. Either way, Gilmore maybe not part of their plan going forward. And there's a lot of contenders out there that may be a cornerback away and they see Gilmore 1 year left on his deal. We're not stuck with them long term. That's great. We like him for that 1 year. It's a pretty team friendly deal. He can help us win right now. The Colts are looking for picks. The Colts may need a quarterback. They may need more offensive linemen because they're not playing like that old Colts offensive line that we're used to that they want to have. They need receivers. They need more consistent pass rushers. They're pretty solid guys stopping the run. Obviously, Buckner and SHAQ Leonard, and they like their safeties. So they could kind of be in a retool or rebuild stage, so they can definitely move on for Gilmore for all those reasons. I think teams could definitely be interested as well. So that's definitely one to look out for there. What could he go for? That's an interesting one. What could he go for in the offseason? I don't think it'd be that much, though. Could they possibly get a second? Maybe if it's a swap deal, perhaps, it'd probably be a third. Yeah, I think a second a little too rich. 1 year left on his deal up there in age. Maybe they'd rather keep him for that. But it'd probably be a third, maybe a third and a fifth, something like that, for the Colts there. But an interesting one. Let's stay at the same position, and once again, we'll stay in the AFC South with Shaquille Griffin of the Jaguars. They signed him not this last offseason, the one before, after he had a pretty solid year for the Seahawks. He wasn't a polished corner, but he had upside, and he showed what he can do. But the Jaguars, since they signed him, they switched defensive coordinators once again. They switched schemes once again there, and Griffin's injured right now. Didn't play too many games this year. But I didn't love the way he was playing there. And the Jags are with their new defense and the players they brought in, the new staff, the players they brought in. They're trying to run a little bit more man than maybe what they wanted to do with Griffin the year before when they brought him in. And then we saw him the last year on Seattle. We saw a lot of zone. We saw a mixture of things. We saw a lot of, cover 2 out there as well, cover 3. So maybe Griffin's more of a zone corner. We saw him in man coverage in a game like the Colts game earlier on, and maybe he's not fit for that much man coverage. What the Jags are trying to do, what the players they're bringing in to do that. So Griffin will have 1 more year left on his deal. It is a little pricey. It's up there in the double digit. It's not up there, but it's in the double digits, obviously. But it's a solid young corner that kind of fits a zone scheme that teams will be looking for. They'll be interested in. There isn't a large amount of very solid corners, especially that are pretty sound in zone coverage. So I think a team would be interested. I think the Jags would be interested in trading him because they have a few other young corners they like on their team, and they could add another one that kind of fits what they're trying to do a little bit more. Because I think the Jags are going to stick it out with this current staff, obviously. So that could make sense. Probably not one that other people will bring up, but that's definitely one I would watch out for all the reasons I explained. And it may be cheaper than what his value is. It might be like a 4th round pick. Could it be a 5th round pick if the Jags are kind of like, hey, he doesn't fit. He didn't really play for us this last year, meaning this year. So you might be able to get him for, anyway, he's a little up there in the cap hit for next year. So you might be able to get him possibly for a 5th round pick, which would be a hell of a deal for another team. Maybe 4th makes a lot of sense to me. But Yeah, there's another corner, another AFC South one there. We had 4 players from the AFC South in a row. Let's talk about SHAQ Thompson, who was brought up a little bit around the deadline, did not get dealt, obviously. And I think he didn't get dealt. 2 reasons. I think teams weren't really sure if he was going to fit them. Maybe do we trade a pretty good pick? He's a good player, so the Panthers had to be asking a lot, and then we're kind of tied to him next year with the money, even though I think it's a pretty good deal. It's going to be around 12, 13 million, next year, which I think it's a pretty good deal because he's a good player. Maybe it's a lot for a linebacker. So teams weren't really sure on their future situation if they should deal for him. And the Panthers started playing a lot better football recently too. So maybe they were like, yeah, do we really want to trade him? He's a captain for us. He's very good at linebacker, fits our defense, very important. So for those 2 reasons, I think that's why he didn't get dealt. So fast forward to the offseason, the Panthers will probably have a new staff in there, a new coaching staff. And SHAQ Thompson was such a unique fit to that defense, covering a lot of ground, blitzing a lot. Lining up in different spots. Even seen him line him up off the edge and show blitz or actually blitz with him. Not that he's an edge rush type of guy, he's an off-ball linebacker, but we actually seen them. I think I saw a little bit more of that last year. So he's a unique style linebacker, off-ball linebacker, at least for the Panthers. And we've seen once teams change scheme, which position group is affected the most. It's linebacker. Sometimes linebackers don't work, so they're going to get a new staff in there. They'll probably switch things up a little bit. Maybe Thompson won't fit. He'll have 1 year left on his deal, and another team will realize, all right, we could afford him. We like him. We think he can fit. We'll trade. Maybe he goes for a little bit less than the value. I think it maybe a 3rd round pick, maybe a 4th, maybe it drops a little bit. I think a team could do that. For all those reasons, I think Thompson could actually be dealt. He wasn't dealt in the trade deadline, but make more sense in the offseason there. It's a pretty good linebacker that could become available as well. I would like for him to go to maybe a 4-3 team, 4-3 defense that more man coverage, not all man coverage, but more man coverage that blitzes a bit. That could make sense. There's a lot of multiple teams that run multiple defense where they're really, what are they? 3-4, 4-3. They kind of switch it up a little bit. Those teams could work as well. And there's quite a few of those teams that blitz a bit too. So that's what I like for Thompson. Next, Cam Akers. So it's another trade deadline guy here. He didn't get dealt at the deadline. And they really wanted him to. It felt like it was almost a guarantee it was going to happen. But I think teams saw leverage and they're like, yeah, the Rams are almost desperate to trade him right now. He doesn't want to play. He's currently not playing for them. So let's just offer them a 7th round pick or a 6th round pick. And then the Rams are like, he's better than that. He's a young running back that's getting better. He's been good for us. I know maybe not this year, but it's a small sample size. So I think the Rams got lowballed and they weren't willing to accept anything. They're like, we'll just try to get Akers to come back. So we fast forward to the offseason. He'll have 1 more year left on his deal, a very cheap deal. And the Rams and Akers may be butting heads still, and the Rams might have an opportunity to go get a running back in free agency for a cheap cost or draft one. And, they have Kyron Williams as well as Darrell Henderson. So maybe they'll feel good about that situation. The Rams may be willing to just get him out of there, or a team may be willing to come up on that asking or that low ball offer that they probably gave during the deadline. So those are reasons. And he has 1 more year left in his deal. I think I mentioned that. Those are the reasons that he actually could be dealt in the offseason. So another obvious one to make the list here. Everyone could have expected that. How about Mike Evans, though? No one probably going to be talking about this. I think it's very possible in the upcoming offseason here. Not just because this is a small part of it, but the big-time receivers got traded last offseason. Receivers, they want a bit of money this year, and those guys that were traded, Devontae Adams was tagged, obviously, but the other guys weren't free agents. They needed a new deal because they were going to be free agents the next year, which was going to be this year. And Evans is the same situation. He's not, he's going to have 1 more left on his deal through 2023. He's going to be in need of a new deal, but on top of that, maybe he'll play. I can see him being a guy that'll play on that last year of the deal, sure. But you look at the Bucs situation. If Brady's not there anymore, they're struggling right now. On top of it, maybe they just go in that rebuild mode. If they don't have Brady, and they gotta fix everything, they got to fix things in multiple spots throughout the roster because, again, they're struggling right now more than expected. So maybe they, move on from the 30-plus-year-old Mike Evans and get a pretty damn good pick in return, and then that way they don't have to pay him. They do have a lot of money tied up in the future from restructuring deals or extending guys, signing guys this offseason. Remember, they signed Russell Gage to a 3-year deal, which maybe could be questionable at this point. So they're tied up a little bit. So that's why it would make sense. Evans could look for, he may not, but he could look for a new deal. Maybe you want to go to more of a contender because the Bucs may not feel like one if Brady's gone. Obviously, maybe they want to enter that rebuild stage because they need to because they're struggling and Brady's going to be gone again, and they don't want to rebuild with a 30-plus-year-old receiver there, and they don't want to give him that new deal in another year or whether he asked for it now. So for all those reasons, it makes sense, and it didn't really make sense. There was one point at this time last year. Imagine if I threw Tyreek Hill, AJ Brown, Devontae Adams in this video. Everybody would have ripped me. They would have gave me shit, but they end up getting traded. I'm not going to guarantee Mike Evans gets traded, but I think it's very realistic, and I explained why there. So what would he go for? That could be interesting. Maybe a first-round pick. It could be if not, it would have to be a lot of, like a McCaffrey type deal, a lot of things that kind of equal a first-round pick. I think the Bucs to do it, maybe they would have to have a first. They'd probably have to have a first there. And if Brady comes back and they get healthy, then I don't think they're going to do it. They're going to try to contend. But definitely an interesting one that to look out for the upcoming offseason there. Another receiver, Elijah Moore. So Elijah Moore's name came up before the trade deadline, and people were talking about it a lot. If you remember, I wasn't really talking about it. I'm like, I don't think he's going to get. I think there's 0% chance. And the Jets even came out and said they don't have any plans to trade him. And my reasoning was, before the Jets came out and said they're not going to trade him, it was common sense to me where they like Elijah Moore. He's still young. I mean, they just added him to the team. They're kind of just getting going offensively. Denzel Mims has been asking for a trade for a bit, and they've been really stubborn to trade him. So they're definitely going to be stubborn to trade a better player like Elijah Moore. So that's why they wouldn't trade him. So it's fast forward the offseason. All of that definitely could be true still, definitely. But if he's still a problem, like unlike Mills like finally kind of publicly, and it was his agent more, publicly requested a trade. So Mims wasn't really a problem for the Jets, locker room, anything like that. But if Elijah Moore, because what he did was kind of uncalled for, kind of demanding a trade just like that, like, I don't, is a little ridiculous. So it kind of gives you an idea of his character a little bit there. I still like him. I think I think he could be a hell of a ball player. I liked him a lot at Ole Miss, but, so if he continues to be like that, which we saw him kind of get back in action last week, but not really. He played like 17% of snaps, and the Jets are struggling in the passing game. They want to be a run-first team, obviously. They trade for a running back so they can continue that. So this all could continue. Moore can kind of be a pain in the ass to the Jets and kind of demand a trade and not show up for things. So therefore, if it kind of stretches along that much and they just don't want that character in that locker room, they definitely could trade him, and they can get something good for him. Maybe if they lose leverage, they wouldn't be able to get a second anymore, but that's where I'd kind of put his value at. But so maybe they would get a third and a fifth, something like that. So it's something that definitely can pop back up. Again, I thought it was 0% chance to trade at deadline. That came true. I think there's some sort of percentage there. The chances that he will be discussed again and he could be traded, somewhere in the offseason. Maybe it's one of those ones where it's not right away. It kind of drags on, maybe even to camp, and he's like, I'm not going to play. Like, all right, let's trade him. Like to get a pick, though, before the draft if they are going to trade him. Another one here, Danielle Hunter, which name has come up, I think, last offseason, maybe even at the deadline before last deadline, not this one that just passed last year, and then this past offseason, his name has kind of come up a bit there. And he'll have one more year left on his deal. He'll probably be seeking more money once again, which is he playing to up? I think he's playing to what his contract looks like coming up, which is a kind of pricey, but we'll see what they'll see. They'll probably have to tweak it or maybe extend him or maybe trade him or maybe release him. So something's going to have to happen. Again, like last year, they had to kind of make a decision. So that's kind of my point there. Whether if they, whatever direction they go with that contract, something will have to be tweaked or something will have to happen. And it's kind of the same story as last offseason. So it could be the case again, obviously. And the Vikings switched schemes to more of a 3-4, and Hunter hasn't really fit it as good as the 4-3. Doesn't mean he's playing bad. He definitely helps him stop and run. He's got a few sacks. He's been a little underwhelming, though, but that doesn't mean he's not playing all right. But they could say like, hey, we'd rather get a better fit in here. Let's trade him, get a pretty good pick, because Hunter, we just saw recent years that he could be a dominant player if in that right scheme. He's on track to lead the NFL in sacks halfway through last year, then he got injured, so that was unfortunate. But so he could go to that right 4-3 team to play that defensive end spot. The Vikings could, who are looking like they're going to be a little tight on cap next offseason. They have a lot free after that, but so they could choose to trade Danielle Hunter, kind of free that for this next year, and then find maybe more of a fit. That's a possibility. His name has come up quite a bit. Again, last offseason, last trade deadline, so it'll probably come up again here. I thought about putting Kirk Cousins in this video because he's come up. His name came up last offseason. And he'll have one more year left on his deal, which will be a $30 million cap hit, which is, I think, pretty good for a solid quarterback. And you see the price going up every year, so some team could want that. And it kind of felt like during the offseason, the Vikings thought Kirk Cousins was almost like a bridge. Usually you use bridge for like quarterbacks that aren't too good, though, because Kirk Cousins is a good quarterback. But it almost felt like the Vikings were still seeking that quarterback of the future there, but they didn't want to go super young because they want to win right now. That's the tricky part. That's why I didn't put Cousins up here, because who are they going to get that's going to help them win? Because the Vikings are trying to win right now, obviously, and they'll be like that in the offseason as well. So that's why it's a little tricky. They may have to hang on to him, and he's played pretty well for them, first year with that system too. And then one more, it's a unique one, because Orlando Brown is actually going to be a free agent. He's going to be a free agent this upcoming offseason in 2023. So it would have to be a tag and trade, and I think that's a realistic tag and trade candidate here. Solid left tackle, solid young left tackle for the Chiefs. But a little inconsistent. You've seen the flashes. The last year's playoffs. Seen the flashes, looked really, really good. Maybe it looks like he's deserving of what he's asking for, and which is over $20 million per year. But there's times where he's a little inconsistent in terms of pass protecting. He's a pretty good run blocker. We've seen him how he fit the Ravens, obviously. So far, it feels like the Chiefs don't want to give him what he's looking for. So fast forward to the offseason, and that's what it is. They did not want to get him what he's looking for, which is over $20 million. So fast forward to the offseason, he's a free agent. They don't want to just let this guy enter free agency, and then they'll get a 2024 third-round compensatory pick, perhaps. Third round, I would predict. But, so they would probably like him back. But are they going to go out and pay over $20 million? So I think they would probably tag him again, because you don't want to let him walk in free agency. And again, I would predict a third-round compensatory pick in 2024, so not even 2023, and what they would get. And if you sign him to over $20 million, it's a lot, maybe too much. What he's asked for. Again, the price is probably going to go up even more, because the team salary is going to go up. It's going to keep going up. Players are going to make more and more money every year here. So they're probably not going to pay him that. They're probably going to, the two sides are probably going to fail in contract negotiations. So they'll probably slap the tag on him again, which is just under $20 million, according to my projections there. Again, second tag, which he's getting paid just over $16 million this year. So it should be 19.994. It's pretty specific, but I think it should be that, because it should be a 20% raise, unless the tag for tackles ends up being richer than that, then he'll get that. So we'll see what it ends up being, but that'll be my projection. So they slap the tag on him, and I don't think he would. This is where it gets tricky, because I don't think he would play on the tag, because he almost didn't this past year, it felt like. But he ended up giving in and did at the 16 point whatever million. So being tagged again could piss a player off enough to, hey, trade me or I'm not going to play, or that situation. But it's a pretty good deal at $19.994 million if my projections are right there. So he could play, but maybe he doesn't. They tag him, and then they could trade him, because there's a team that maybe runs the ball a little bit more than the Chiefs that view Orlando Brown as more of a fit, that would take him for that price, because tackles, there's a shortage on them. There's a shortage on good ones. Here's one that has a lot of upside, and again, could fit another team a little bit better. I think the Chiefs should keep him. I think he should play on that tag if they tag again. I think they will tag him again, and I think he should play on that. Unless it'd be great for the Chiefs, and if they could agree, somehow get Orlando Brown to agree on something around that second tag range, under $20 million, around that range, and Maybe it's backloaded where he'll get maybe more than $20 million in the future. That could be great for both sides, really. So it's a possibility. There's different possibilities here, but I thought he was an excellent tag and trade candidate for those reasons. And he could go a team that, that could use desperate for a tackle, maybe want to run the ball a little bit more than the Chiefs do because he's a pretty physical run blocker, just a little inconsistent in the pass protection. Sometimes has some really good moments. So that's why he made sense, and he made the end of the video here as a unique one. Tag and trade possibility. We saw Devontae Adams was a tag and trade guy last year. We thought Orlando Brown or a guy like Jesse Bates could be this past offseason, but we'll see. So those are my 10 off-season trade candidates. We'll see what happens when we get to that time. Let me know your guys' thoughts. If you have any different candidates, let me know in the comments. We're always talking to you guys on Twitter. We have recent trade deadline grades video up. We have weekly picks, power ranking, score predictions, a lot more. So join us on our channel. Check it out. Like, subscribe to notifications on. Follow us on Twitter. Any link you're looking for, pin in the comments. That's going to do it. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.